Hello and welcome to Mabinda TV. So for now, I like to look at the political formations. Which political formations will lead to a win for the opposition? Which political formations will lead to a win for the opposition? So basically now you have Kalonzo Sifuna ticket. You have Kalonzo Sifuna ticket. Do you think it will lead to do you think the Kalonzo Sifuna ticket will lead to uh, a win for the presidency? Of course, you have Kalonzo Musyoka, Edwin Sifuna ticket, then you have Kalonzo Matiang'i, then you have Kalonzo Gachagua. So basically, it appears that Kalonzo Musyoka is going to be the sole candidate for the opposition. So basically, how will that go? And I think that is something that we really must interrogate. That is the win, which ticket will win the presidency for the opposition. And I think if we go that route, then you have Kalonzo Gachagua ticket. Kalonzo Gachagua ticket, I think, is a very formidable ticket. I think really, I think Sifuna is emerging as the leader of the Gen Zs. The Gen Zs have always said they are leaderless. So could Kalonzo Musyoka, could Sifuna be the leader of the Gen Zs? And so when he teams up with when Edwin Sifuna teams up with Kalonzo Musyoka, do you think it will be a formidable enough ticket? So basically, I think right now the Gen Zs have no leader, and I think Edwin Sifuna, frankly, is the leader of the Gen Z. So basically, that ticket we'll wait to see and see how that pans out. Then you have Kalonzo Matiang'i ticket. Remember, Fred Matiang'i has been proposed by former President Uhuru Kenyatta. That is Fred Matiang'i. So former President Uhuru Kenyatta wants Matiang'i to be the president of the country. Of course, remember, Matiang'i was the de facto prime minister during Uhuru's regime. So basically, he was the one who kept the government going around. I think he had been assigned a lengthy title, but effectively, he was the prime minister, supervised all cabinet ministers, and of course, you had Matiang'i really going to great lengths to ensure that the government of President Uhuru worked. So basically, you have President Uhuru Kenyatta basically seconding Matiang'i to be the Jubilee presidential candidate. Or of course, then you have him and Matiang'i Kalonzo ticket. So I think basically, I think this is a ticket that could work. Matiang'i is a non-performer. Of course, you have the Rivayala dumping of bodies and the Ruaraka land saga doing him in. But I think those every public servant in Kenya has Doa has at least a 10, so you just have to choose which, if those 10s are too much for you to vote for a Kalonzo Matiang'i ticket. I think Matiang'i could bring in those who long for the day when the government will perform. I think Matiang'i is a crisis mode of a leader. If you think about Fred Matiang'i, I think he is a crisis mode of a leader, so just as John Pombe Magufuli of Tanzania was. Remember, President Magufuli of Tanzania basically was a crisis mode of a leader. Basically, Magufuli, if a civil servant had done a wrongdoing, basically he was punished there and then, and I think that could be the way Matiang'i could rule. So he is a crisis mode of leaders usually come in when there's a crisis, and then they come along and of course they whip things up in shape. That is a crisis mode of a leader. So I think Fred Matiang'i is that school of thought of former president, the late President John Pombe Magufuli. So I think Matiang'i, so Kalonzo Matiang'i ticket looks very formidable. And then another ticket that we could the Kalonzo, look at the Kalonzo Gachagua ticket. So cool Kalonzo Gachagua ticket be the one to carry the presidency. Gachagua, of course, is impeached, so I'm not sure whether he will be allowed to run by the constitution. Of course, Gachagua is challenging his impeachment. Gachagua is challenging his impeachment in the Supreme Court, so we will see how that will go around. So, of course, if Gachagua challenges his impeachment in the Supreme Court, then I think that is the way that we could have that is Gachagua. Of course, Gachagua could bring in the Mount Kenya vote, but Gachagua could bring in the Mount Kenya vote. I think basically in Kenya, Kiku's you have at least 10 counties being majority Kikuyu counties, of course, and that is a very formidable voting bloc. I think they have about Mount Kenya is about 10. 8 million votes. So basically, if you secure even just 10% of this 8 million, that's about 800,000 votes. And I think that was why President